Nell Carter, George Kennedy, and introducing Victor Love as Hank Gathers. Final Shot.
Coming Wednesday, April 22nd at 8 to Channel 5. Now, the #1 primetime news hour in Los Angeles. Award-winning Hal Fishman, Jan Carl, Larry McCormick, Stu Nahan with sports. Channel 5, News at 10.
Good evening. Tennis great Arthur Ashe revealed today he has the AIDS virus. During a crowded news conference in New York City, Ashe sadly and emotionally confirmed to the world the rumors about his illness.
Some of you heard that I had tested positive for HIV, the virus that causes AIDS. That is indeed the case.
A personal crisis. That's how tennis great Arthur Ashe describes living 3.5 years with the terrible secret he has AIDS. The former world tennis champ says he contracted the virus from a blood transfusion during a heart bypass operation nearly 10 years ago. That after suffering a massive heart attack. It was a secret he and his wife Jean had hoped to conceal. That is until several days ago when he was confronted by a newspaper reporter who'd received a tip and threatened to run the story.
Whoever it was that called USA Today and ratted on me, if that person hadn't called, we wouldn't have this press conference, and I'd still be living a relatively normal life. Some people may ask, why not go public earlier? The answer to me and my family was simple. Any admission of HIV infection at that time would have seriously, permanently, and my wife and I firmly believe, unnecessarily infringed upon our family's right to privacy.
Ashe was the first black player to win one of tennis's Grand Slam titles. He won the U.S. Open in 1968, the Australian Open in 1970, and he beat Jimmy Connors for the Wimbledon title in 1975. Ashe has full-blown AIDS and is on a daily regimen of drugs, including AZT. Today, with his wife at his side, he broke down, overcome with emotion, as he talked about the impact of the disease on his family, including his 5-year-old daughter. Well, the tennis star says he feels fine, and this isn't the end of the world. There's little doubt that Arthur Ashe is now facing his toughest opponent ever, AIDS. In New York, I'm Glenn Thompson, Channel 5 News at 10.
The nation's blood supply is much safer now than when Arthur Ashe contracted the AIDS virus through a blood transfusion in 1983. Universal blood testing for HIV began 18 months later in 1985. According to the Centers for Disease Control, just under 5,000 AIDS cases here in the United States have been linked to tainted blood from transfusions. That's about 2% of the total AIDS cases in the United States. Officials say only about 20 of those cases involved contaminated blood transfusions after 1985, when the blood testing began. On the international scene, Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat is safe and evidently well tonight. The PLO chairman is being treated for minor injuries after his executive jet crash-landed in the Libyan desert. Arafat and 15 other survivors were flown to a hospital in the city of Misrata 15 hours after they were reported missing. 5 of the injured are in serious condition. In addition, Arafat's pilot, co-pilot, and flight engineer were all killed in the crash landing. A short time later, Arafat was seen in a television interview with Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi at his bedside. Other than a bandage over his right eye, Arafat appeared to be in good condition and in excellent spirits. And there were wild celebrations in many parts of the Arab world as the word spread that Arafat had survived that crash. Here in this country, the jury has deadlocked in the drug trial of former Panamanian leader Manuel Noriega. However, the judge in the case ordered the panel to go back into continued deliberations. Attorneys for Noriega arrived at the Miami courtroom today, as they have every day for the past 7 months. Today, the jury foreman sent the judge a note saying one of the jurors has admitted to making up his mind before deliberations began. Well, the judge then called on the jurors to resume their work, making certain they obey, as he put it, the spirit of deliberations by listening to each other's views. Locally, a judge in Santa Ana today declared a mistrial in the penalty phase of the trial of Rosie Alfaro after jurors failed to reach a verdict. 20-year-old Alfaro was convicted of fatally stabbing a 9-year-old girl 57 times during a burglary 2 years ago. The jurors were unable to reach a unanimous vote on whether Alfaro should be sentenced to death or life in prison without the possibility of parole. Attorneys in the case are due back in court tomorrow to argue if the penalty phase should be retried or if Alfaro should be sent to prison. And a man suspected of murdering his ex-girlfriend was shot and killed today after a 5-hour standoff with police in North Hollywood. Officers tracked 40-year-old Jeffrey May to the Magnolia Boulevard Motel about 10 o'clock this morning. During the standoff, police evacuated several families from the motel. May, who arrived in town yesterday from Washington, D.C., was wanted for killing his former girlfriend. She was gunned down last night outside her apartment in North Hollywood. Police have identified the dead woman as 34-year-old Margaret Leith. It was Leith's ex-husband who initially reported the shooting to police. Authorities say he was with her last night when Jeffrey May forced his way into the victim's apartment. Jen?
A drive-by shooting took the life of a baby girl today, a tragic but increasingly familiar scenario in south central L.A. where it happened. Bob Navarro has further details.
19-year-old Michael Haley was driving his baby, 18-month-old Sabrina Haley, to his father's house this morning. He was stopped at a light at 48th and Avalon when two men pulled alongside. For neighbors, it was a familiar sound.
Oh, a lot of shots.
How many?
Oh, I'd say maybe 8 or 10.
When the shooting stopped, the baby was mortally wounded. Police say the shooting was gang-related, and they're asking for help in locating a 1978 Monte Carlo that stands out.
The uniqueness comes where there are several small holes that will, what they actually are slide handle holes used in auto body work, but it could also resemble that of a shotgun pattern. They're very similar in appearance. This vehicle, the remainder of this vehicle, is also that chocolate-colored brown.
Police investigators have offered complete confidentiality, even anonymity, for anybody who steps forward with any information. In central Los Angeles, Bob Navarro, Channel 5 News at 10.
A motorcyclist who prosecutors say caused a car crash that killed a husband and wife was charged today with 2 counts of vehicular manslaughter. He also faces 1 count of leaving the scene of an accident. Defendant Martin Ruthman could face up to 16 years in prison if convicted on all 3 felony counts. He remains free on bail. Ruthman did not enter a plea today and quickly left the courtroom after hearing the charges. According to prosecutors, Ruthman acted irresponsibly when he forced the victim's car off the road. The vehicle slammed into a tree and the couple died at the scene of the accident. And in Sun Valley, 4 people were critically injured, including a baby boy, when 2 cars collided overnight. 4 others suffered minor injuries. The accident happened at the intersection of Branford Street and San Fernando Road. The driver was alone in one of the vehicles and the other 7 victims rode in the other car. But it's not clear exactly why the collision occurred. One of the cars caught fire, although paramedics say none of the injured suffered burns.
Defense lawyers rested their case this afternoon in the trial of 4 Los Angeles police officers accused of assault and using excessive force in the Rodney King beating. Shortly afterward, the prosecution began calling rebuttal witnesses. Eric Spillman has more on today's developments.
Prosecutor Terry White calls it the code of silence. Cops will not come forward to say that other cops have done something wrong. That's what White says is happening in this trial. White has tried to subpoena Sergeant Fred Nichols. He's the man in charge of the training of LAPD officers. Nichols reviewed the videotape of the beating for the grand jury last year. He said it clearly shows there's excessive force and that the conduct of the officers cannot be justified. But Nichols does not want to come to court to say that. He would only send his lawyer, who says that Nichols has a stress-related disability and therefore cannot testify. The prosecutor says that is just an excuse.
Sergeant Nichols just does not want to come in and take an oath and tell the world that he believes these officers use excessive force. We don't believe a stress-related disability or any type of disability exists other than an unwillingness to come in and tell the truth.
Prosecutors say they've had trouble trying to find police experts who are willing to testify against the 4 cops on trial here. Several of these so-called experts on the use of force have first agreed to take the witness stand, but then mysteriously changed their minds at the last minute. According to